I want you to get together.
Do you think narcissism is or stems from an inability to connect to God? It's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I used to be really into the narcissist subtopic in conspiracy years ago myself. I used to listen to like narcissistic abuse survivors and all these type of things, because narcissism was actually quite a big subgenre of conspiracy for many years. Around the 2012 to 2016 period, there's quite a lot of channels out there talking about the spirit of narcissism, and how you need to go no contact with family members who are narcissists, and how there is no relationship with them that's fruitful or positive in any way. It's in their nature that's unchanging for them to basically drain you like a vampire at every turn and angle, and there's not a damn thing you can do about it. And they'll never truly love you or respect you as a human being because they don't understand concepts like love or respect. They're literally like monsters, like walking, talking, human-looking, human-sounding, soulless monsters in a way, who can perfectly fake human behavior and patterns, but have nothing in them that's true, you know. And there's varying degrees of narcissists, isn't there? There's high functioning, highly intelligent narcissists, border, and then there's the idiot narcissists as well, who are actually very low intelligence and not very smart at all, who kind of aren't playing a game with people necessarily, but they're very unpleasant to be around, if you get what I mean, in a controlling sense. And they're kind of the worst types in a way, and the cruelest in a way as well. But the smart ones tend to mask it better. They tend to be able to feign being human a bit more, and those are the ones that usually people end up falling in love with and getting relationships with, and then only afterwards realizing the danger they're in. You get what I mean, and who they've actually ended up with, and by then it's usually too late, and they're kind of trapped in this cycle of abuse. And I think the low intelligent narcissists, it's kind of explosive relationships from the beginning, and they never really get into long term relationships, because like, as it's in the narcissistic nature, they actually don't have that level of love or respect to have long term relationships, true ones. But it never usually gets to that for the low intelligent ones, and if it does, it's just constant chaos all the time, and it's no secret about what they are. So there is that. But what makes somebody like that? I mean, it's argued that you could say it's people who have fully rejected God, have been given over to a reprobate mind, and have just become a monster. But I don't think so. I do think there's some demonic influence behind it. I really do. But I also think some people are just predisposed to be like that, unfortunately. I do think there are some people in this world, who I don't want to say are unredeemable. Perhaps we could argue they're not actually people at all. We could go down the wheat and tares argument that they don't actually have a soul or a spirit. In a way, maybe you're going down the NPC route here. And that's why they can't empathize with human beings, because they actually are technically not. They might look and talk like one, but they're actually something else. So there is that. Maybe that's the case. Probably not. I will explain and say that's probably not the case. I think it's dangerous to go down the route of saying some people aren't human, literally, or don't have a soul. I think, but a lot of people do go down that route when trying to explain this, and I personally don't buy it. I think they are people who have heavily given in to the demons within them because they had no context or examples surrounding them to lead them to the other side. And it's probably extremely difficult to bring them back now because of that. But I don't want to say it's impossible. Everything's possible with God, in that truest form. So it's hard to say. It really is hard to say. All I know is if you're dealing with a true narcissist, and I've met a few in my life, stay away. Cut off all contact. Give them nothing, because you give them just the tiniest gap in that door to your life, they will take it, and they will take everything you have with them. You cannot allow it. You cannot allow it. If you've crossed a narcissist and you're in their crosshairs, God help you. Because narcissists see revenge to the end. Nothing stops them. They're like Terminators. Okay, it's the truly terrifying things because they just see everything as prey, and they see anything that exposes them as predator threat. So they react in attack mode. They're dangerous. They're very dangerous people. But they also are very clever not to break the law too. So the way they play you and get back at you is the most underhanded, gaslighting, bizarre psychological torture type ways you can imagine. It's someone's asked what are some of the signs of a narcissist. Well, I'm kind of giving you them now. The again, I think I would say in my life, I probably met about and interacted with maybe 3 or 4. So they are rare. And I feel like even then I've in some odd sense met way too many than the average person would. Most people maybe interact with 2 in their entire lifetime. But I've just been unlucky. Very much unlucky in that. And I've in some cases barely just come out by the skin of my teeth. And in others, I've learned to keep my head down and to be clever with how I interact with them, so they don't get me in their crosshairs. But it's narcissists are odd creatures that are difficult to explain away. I don't want to alleviate them of all their guilt and responsibility by saying it's just demons making them act that way. I think humans have the capacity for evil too. Some people just have the capacity to do evil things without demons, okay, without their involvement. I think demons can encourage and foster and, you know, percolate that feeling within somebody, that already predispositioned urge that people have, and make them act upon those impulses more. But fundamentally, corruption and evil is a human problem. It's an issue humans have to deal with. And a lot of that evil stems from the 7 deadly sins, gluttony, pride, envy, rage, all these things, you know what I mean? That lusts and stuff and desires and that lead people to fully give themselves over to that kind of way of being. And narcissism is a self-aggrandizing, obsessive thing as well. It's pride primarily. The belief that they are better than other people is where narcissism finds most of its roots, and therefore anybody else around them is just a plaything, subjugated under their rule. It's and you'll find narcissists like to become middle management. Okay, or will always strive to work themselves up to upper management, but unfortunately for them, most upper management recognize them as narcissists and are weary to give them that kind of power. So they always end up somewhere around the middle. So they won't be like let's say a supermarket hierarchy, for example. They'll never be a shelf stacker or a till worker or a shop floor worker. You may find them around maybe the team running level, so the level above shop floor worker that runs the teams. You may find them around that level, but usually they're just a level above that. So they're the boss of the people who run the people. So they don't run the store. They're not the boss of the store necessarily. More like an assistant manager. You know what I mean? That's where you'll find the narcissists, around that level. That's where they have just enough influence where they can justify the way they treat people without it seeming like they're not doing their job. But it's not too much power and influence where they'll just get fired instantly for abusing it because they run everything and there's no one to answer to, you know what I mean? So that's where you'll find narcissists usually around middle management areas, because they like to have authority over people. Okay, but they also like the plausible deniability that middle management gives them where they're just doing. I'm just doing what my boss tells me to do. My boss told me to make sure people do their job. Okay, so I'm making sure people are doing their job, and by doing that, they usually torture the staff. It's kind of it's that kind of thing, you know. Um, so there's a working practical example of where you'll often find them, and I know that because I've dealt with them myself working in a supermarket, and I call them little Hitlers, you know, petty tyrants. They love the authority, that minor authority they have over people who are just trying to make ends meet. They understand that most people feet at below them because of the position they're in and where they work, you know, those low skilled, low paying, easy to get job because they just need to pay the bills because, you know, that's what it is. They know those people can't afford to answer back. So they play on that fear and they lord their power over them. And they say, "You talking back to me? Do you want me to? You don't want me to write you up, do you? You know, if I write you up, you might. That's three strikes. You already have two this week from me. You know, if you get one more, then you might lose your job. You know, they'll talk like that to. They'll do that kind of stuff to people, just to watch them squirm. just to see that look in their eye when they make eye contact with them, where it's like the narcissist could just look at them and say, "That's right, I own you." That's how they think. That's how they act and believe, and it gives them something. It gives them. It's like food to them, to the narcissist. Your fear, your subjugation. It feeds them. It's really disturbing to watch. And I found the best defense is a good, straight away, immediate offense. Okay, if you end up going into an environment and you manage to quickly identify that type of character, okay, or people warn you about them, let's say, or something before you meet them, and you're prepared to meet them, the moment they attempt to do something that makes you feel small, and that's them doing their thing, doing their narcissistic thing, the second they attempt to do that, you stop, look them in the eye, and say, "Not me. That isn't going to work." And you stay firm straight away. You look at them in the eye and you basically say, "No, that isn't going to work with me." Okay, straight away. And because of their cover, because they need to maintain their power, okay, and because you're just like an unknown entity to them, basically, you won't be worth it. They'll look at you and go, "Okay, fair enough, it's not going to work on him. Go to the next person." They'll move on quickly, okay? Because that's just the way they work. And also, it's kind of game respects game. That's how these people think. And they'll think, okay, this person's got some balls. They're not going to fall for my shit so easily. I'll leave them alone. Fair enough. And they'll move on. Do you know what I mean? Because they want weak people. And it's kind of they're not looking for a fight, and they're not looking to jeopardize their position of authority, because someone like you who's just stood up to them could go to the boss and blow the cover. Do you get what I mean? So that's the best defense I've seen so far. You don't want to push them to the point where you make an enemy out of them, though. You just want to firmly stand your ground straight away. That's the best defense I've found against true narcissists. That's the best defense so far, practically speaking, in my day-to-day life that has worked, and I've used it maybe 2 or 3 times, and it has worked every time. Okay. But you can push that boundary sometimes to the point where they'll take it as, this person's my enemy and I must destroy them. And people have tried and failed miserably, okay? Because again, they're not perfect. They're not like gods. You know? They're people who make mistakes and because of their own pride and narcissism. Don't get me wrong, you know. But I have found the best defense is an immediate defensive, offensive attack at the first jab toward you, the first attempt to get you. It's just put your foot down. No. Um, they ain't stupid, just ruthless. Exactly. They want someone to trample. Exactly. You know, they want to feel powerful by lording authority over people they consider lesser than them. So just don't give them that satisfaction first thing. They are soul suckers, says Cassidy. Are absolutely they are. Facts, Paul. Sorry, I'm a bit behind. I've been attacked by a narcissist a few times. They love to accuse you of what they're doing and blame. Shift crazy manipulation. Yeah, that's the narcissist modus operandi. The gaslighters. They'll psychologically abuse you and call you crazy for thinking that's what's happening, because they always do everything with a level of plausible deniability. Do you get what I mean? Like it's master manipulators. Like, it's the best way to describe these things. Shielded Sugar 68 says they're idiots. Sometimes, as I explained at the start, there's two types. There's low IQ idiot narcissists, and then there's manipulative high IQ narcissists. There's very little in between. It's odd. And again, usually the best way to deal with either is immediate defense, offensive defense. Do you get what I mean? That's the best way I've found it. At the end of life, as one judges self, the consequences of such an imbalance and its devastating havoc throughout life would be a lesson to understand the dualistic balance inherent in the universe. Okay, Jake. I think you may have said something profound there, but you lost me with the word salad. Could you simplify the message a little bit, please? Andrew Tate is a prime example. I suppose I've never really watched his stuff. I don't really know anything about it. Andrew Tate, I'm aware of what he is, a UFC fighter who's created like a manosphere type podcasting circuit universe community, who got arrested. Him and his brother got arrested, didn't they, I believe? But also, I think he was also seen throwing a few Freemason hand signs during the process. So I'd probably stay away, personally. Narcissists push forgiveness to its limits when it's a close family member. Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, it's hard for family. Like, it must be hard to have, for example, a narcissistic parent. I imagine that's very difficult because of the blood ties involved there, and the personal attachment and responsibility you feel you owe to these people, that type of thing. And it's hard to break that because this is the person who's raised you, who you're supposed to have been able to trust, and they've never given you any reason to actually trust them. And it's probably a very tough situation to be in for a lot of people, and that's why there are these support groups out there for people going no contact with their parents because of this. And it's interesting listening to their stories. It really is. It's harrowing, some of the things these narcissists do to people. It's yeah. And the scary thing is that when you start listening to the behaviors of some of these stories people are sharing, and you start to realize there's people in my life who have treated me like that, and you never notice that it's actually a bad thing. You kind of internalize the abuse so much that you haven't realized you're being abused. And then it can become easy then to kind of start pointing fingers at everybody around you and saying, you're a narcissist, you're a narcissist. So there is that too. You've got to find, but some people are just dicks. Not everyone's a narcissist, So you've got to try and figure out who is and isn't that kind of soulless sucking vampire. So there is a very fine line you've got to walk sometimes. But I don't know if can a narcissist come back from that and be saved? I mean, it's tough. I would hope so. But it would take something big for them to see the error of their ways and want to change. Actually sincerely want to be a better person. They'd have to make that choice themselves before anything happens, And it's like narcissists are like it's just a step below psychopathy, I suppose. And sociopathy, is that the word? Or sociopathic tendencies? What's the word for that? It's hard. It is hard. All psychopaths are narcissists, but not all narcissists are psychopath. That's correct. Yeah. No, narcissists don't tend to go down the murder route. Psychopaths will, because they have zero compassion or empathy or an ability to connect on that kind of level with humans. Narcissists understand how to fake that, but also I don't think they have a desire to be murderous in any way. I think they just have the desire to control. There's a slight difference. The psychopaths tend to be bloodthirsty. Yeah, that's kind of not always, but it usually leads to that because it's a power trip. It's a power trip thing. And if you think they don't know what they're doing, they do. One told me their superpower was manipulation. They know exactly what they're doing. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's terrible because you kind of get conditioned by the abuse, so you become drawn to them, and they to you. It's definitely spiritual. Yeah, yeah. A lot of people in narcissistic abusive relationships, tend not to feel like they can leave, and they kind of feel codependent on the abuser. And the abuser tends to try and make it that way. Tries to make it so the abused feels as though they need the abuser, and without them there would be nothing. It's really dark. It's really, really dark. Daniel Macquarie says, what do you think of the serpent seed theory? I think there's a lot to it, and I think it was made clear, that God said I would put enmity between her seed and your seed, and her seed will crush your skull and you'll bruise their heel, so it's kind of, that was a message out there to say that there seems to be some kind of non-human seed mixed in within the people, the serpent seed, and there'll be a war between them forever. There'll be enmity between the two until the end of the earth, And I think this explains the Nephilim, and the Nephilim is a large part of this serpent seed theory. And I do believe they were fully defeated in a sense when Christ came and conquered death and took the keys of Hades and freed Abraham's bosom, and also gave us authority in his name over the spirits. That was the final blow. The seed of the woman to destroy the serpent seed. And now those disembodied spirits of the now dead Nephilim sure wandered the earth as disembodied spirits, as demons, but we now have the weapons against them. And the whole world is geared towards making sure people don't figure that out. That's the conspiracy, isn't it? So I can buy it, but whether there's still people knocking about who have the serpent seed in them is another thing that I'm not 100% on, but we are told about the wheat and the tares parable, that the wheat and the tares grow together, and you can't distinguish the difference between them until the harvest. And then it's up to the harvester, the reaper, to separate the two in the end and burn the tares and get rid of them. So it's not up to us, the people, to decide who is and isn't a human, and who is and isn't a part of the serpent seed, who is and isn't a wheat or a tare. That's for Jesus to do in the end, for the final harvest, So I think it's you can speculate, but it's dangerous for us to play serpent seed hunter, okay? Because we don't know. It's difficult for us to make that distinction as fallible humans with limited perceptions. It really is difficult to make that decision. So we probably shouldn't be trying to make that decision. Serpent Seed explains psychopaths who have no empathy and all the serial killers, among other crazy people. It could be a very valid explanation for why this happens, yes. And this is why I explained earlier, it does feel like these people who are this way are lacking something basic that makes us human. And it's like they look human, but are they really? In a way. But again, it's who are we to know? We don't know the heart or the soul, so we shouldn't be making those types of, and we should treat them, I suppose, like we try to do in the West, fairly under the law, because we can't make that distinction of human or not ourselves, because it's impossible to know. So we shouldn't be attempting to label people as not human, because as soon as you start going down that path, it's a dangerous route. It leads to death, misery, destruction, and genocide, and all sorts of horrible things. You should be very careful with that train of thought, extremely careful. And it's not something I encourage. It really isn't. It's not easy when it's one of your children. Exactly, you know what I mean? It's not like you who has a child, a narcissistic child, are you a serpent seed who's birthed another serpent seed? I doubt it. Which is why we also should be very careful trying to make that kind of comparison. Unless it's like a recessive thing and it skips a generation or something, I don't know. But it's kind of like, this is why I'm very tentative to accuse narcissists and psychopaths of not being human or being of the serpent seeds. I think it's more likely the whole serpent seed thing is quite literally hybrid humans, reptilian humans like the Nephilim. That makes more sense. And they still exist in spiritual form, and it's possible there are Nephilim still among us in physical form, though in extremely limited capacities. So it's one of those. So Ivy says, if you get too paranoid, then you may think serpent seed runs in your line. That's what I mean. And what matters is the choice we make with our free will and choose Christ. Exactly. I think that's why the whole born again thing is involved with the Christ's way, to become anew. Born again in Christ in a way is to lose any corruption of the serpent seed if it's in you. Perhaps you could argue that's what it's really all about. And become as God truly intended, uncorrupted. But again, these are deep theological concepts that have been argued and speculated by theologians for millennia. I don't think I'm going to give you the answer right now in this live Q&A YouTube show. But it's certainly fun to think about. I agree with that.
I want you to get together